3 men vanished from a locked island. The clock had stopped. The table was set for a meal no one ate, and to this day no one has ever found their bodies. This is the story of Eilean Mòr and the 3 lighthouse keepers who disappeared into thin air. The Flannan Isles sit in the cold, unforgiving waters of the Outer Hebrides off the northwest coast of Scotland. They are barely more than rock. 7 islets battered constantly by the North Atlantic, so remote that sailors once called them the 7 Hunters. In 1899, the Northern Lighthouse Board finished construction of a lighthouse on the largest of these islets, Eilean Mòr, hoping to prevent the shipwrecks that had plagued the area for centuries. It was a marvel of Victorian engineering. Sturdy, modern, built to withstand anything the sea could throw at it. By December 1900, 3 men were stationed there. James Ducat, the principal keeper, 43 years old, with more than 2 decades of experience. Thomas Marshall, his second assistant. And Donald MacArthur, an occasional keeper filling in for a colleague on sick leave, a big, physically imposing man known for his temper. Their job was simple and unforgiving. Keep the light burning no matter what. On the night of December 15, 1900, the steamer Archtor was making its way from Philadelphia to the port of Leith. As it passed the Flannan Isles, the crew noticed something wrong. The lighthouse, which should have been sweeping its beam across the dark water, was off. But the ship couldn't stop to investigate, and by the time it finally docked days later, the message took time to reach the people who needed to hear it. It wasn't until December 26th that a relief vessel, the Hesperus, arrived to check on the keepers. Captain Jim Harvey sounded the ship's horn. He fired a flare into the sky. Nothing. No light, no signal, no sign of life at all. A relief keeper named Joseph Moore volunteered to go ashore alone. He climbed the 160 steps cut into the cliffside, making his way toward the lighthouse compound in total silence. What he found inside would become one of the most haunting scenes in maritime history. The kitchen clock had stopped. The beds were made. A chair lay overturned on the floor. On the table sat the remains of a meal, as if the men had simply gotten up and walked away mid-bite. A canary sat alone in its cage, the only living thing left in the building. Outside, the light itself had been carefully prepared for the next lighting. The men had clearly been carrying out their duties right up until the moment they vanished. There was no sign of James Ducat, Thomas Marshall, and Donald MacArthur. Moore radioed back to the ship in a panic. More men came ashore. They searched every inch of the small island and found only one clue. A single set of oilskin coats had been left behind, still hanging in their place. That detail mattered because keepers were under strict orders never to go outside during rough weather without them. If one man had gone out in just his shirt sleeves, something must have gone very wrong, very fast. At the island's west landing, the searchers found the real evidence of violence. But it wasn't the kind left by human hands. A supply box secured more than 100 feet above sea level had been smashed open, its contents scattered. Iron railings along the cliff path were bent and twisted out of shape. A section of railway track bolted into concrete had been physically torn from its moorings. A boulder weighing more than a ton had been shifted from where it sat. Turf had been ripped away from the cliff top, 200 feet above the water. Whatever had struck this island, it had struck with staggering force. The Northern Lighthouse Board superintendent, Robert Muirhead, arrived a few days later to lead the official investigation. He had personally recruited all 3 missing men and knew them well. Piecing together the wreckage and the keeper's own log entries, he concluded that Ducat and Marshall had gone down to the west landing to secure equipment during a violent storm, and that a sudden massive wave had swept up over the rocks and pulled them into the sea. MacArthur, he theorized, must have gone out afterward searching for his colleagues and been lost the same way. In his official report, Muirhead concluded that an unusually large wave had risen up the rock face and swept the men away with tremendous force. It was a plausible explanation. It was also, for many people, deeply unsatisfying. Because here is the detail that has haunted this case for over a century. The last confirmed entries in the lighthouse's official log were dated December 13th, 2 full days before the disappearance. What happened during those final 48 hours has never been established with certainty. For decades, rumors swirled that a diary had been found describing 3 days of supernatural terror. Marshall allegedly writing that MacArthur, a hardened, physically tough man, had been reduced to tears by the storm, and that all 3 men had turned to prayer as the tempest raged. It's a chilling image. It is also, according to research by journalist Mike Dash of the Fortean Times, entirely fabricated. A story that was invented years after the fact and had no basis in the real Northern Lighthouse Board records. Strip away the fabrication, and what remains are theories built on the actual documented evidence. The most widely accepted theory among historians remains Muirhead's original explanation, that Marshall and Ducat were swept into the sea while trying to secure equipment during an extraordinary storm, and that MacArthur perished attempting to find them. Some researchers have pointed out that Marshall had previously been fined for losing equipment in an earlier storm, a small but real financial penalty that, for a working man supporting a family in 1900, may have made the risk of going outside in dangerous conditions feel worth taking. Other theories are darker and far less supported by evidence. Some have speculated that MacArthur's known temper led to a violent confrontation on the cliffs, a fight that ended with all 3 men falling to their deaths. A more extreme version imagines MacArthur killing his 2 colleagues before taking his own life. Neither theory has a shred of forensic evidence behind it. There were no bodies and no crime scene. There was only an empty lighthouse and a smashed supply box on a cliff 200 feet above an angry sea. And then there are the theories with no basis in fact at all. The ones that grew out of pure folklore in the years that followed. Sea serpents, ghost ships, foreign spies. None of these ever had supporting evidence. They exist only because human beings faced with a mystery this complete will always try to fill the silence with something. More than a century later, the Flannan Isles Lighthouse still stands. Automated now, its keepers long gone from the profession itself. In 2018, the mystery inspired a feature film called The Vanishing, with Gerard Butler and Peter Mullen. Also in 2018, the descendants of the 3 missing men unveiled a memorial on the Isle of Lewis, a bronze wave sweeping over a stone lighthouse built by the community that once sent these 3 men out to keep a light burning at the edge of the world. No bodies were ever recovered. No definitive cause was ever proven. Whatever happened on Eilean Mòr during those 2 missing days in December 1900 was witnessed only by James Ducat, Thomas Marshall, and Donald MacArthur, and they never got the chance to tell anyone what it was. Thank you for watching until the end. Like and subscribe for new mysteries every week.